Welcome everyone to I4J's 9th interactive video presentation Q&A session with our favorite economist, Bob Cohen. And Bob's topic today is the rise of a software and networking-based economy, where the jobs come from. So very topical. And just as a quick intro, my name is Ben Baldwin, and I'm hosting this series for David and Vint. I started this series because I think we should be sharing and helping each other. And this isn't my day job per se. Just as a quick intro, I'm the founder of a company called Scale Driver. We do innovation consulting, but instead of consultants, we match executives with real innovators within a process that predicts innovation and accelerates it. So it's really fun. And I like these topics because they are usually covering innovation and people, which is really the most important part of innovation. So in particular, I like live video because it's a great way to introduce ourselves to the group and share what we're working on in an informal way and even ask for help. So the video technology also lets people interact in real time, which is really cool. And I've started everybody off on mute. All I request is that if you have a question, please introduce yourself to Bob and also to the audience. So even if you know Bob, the audience would like to know who you are, so that everybody understands who you are. And you can also use the chat feature on the right side of your screen if you want to get in touch with people in the group or me. And just a note, this is an open link to this interactive video, so we may have some people join us who are not members of I4J, and we are recording it so we can keep this as a reference. So now I'll get out of the way and turn it over to you, Bob.
Okay, so today I'm going to talk about some work I've been doing on the rise of a software and networking-based economy. And what I'm seeing is that we're going through a period when we're actually moving to a much greater use of cloud services, cloud computing, and the Internet of Things. And I see this as kind of a third wave that the internet started in around 1980. In the 1990s to 2000, we got the World Wide Web, web browsers, and e-commerce. And that now we've really moved to a different level of services and data analytics that I think have the capability of dramatically changing a number of industries and really changing the economy. So part of what I'm going to do here is go through an introduction to make the case about the change. Then I'm going to look at some of the arguments that I've developed about where the jobs are likely to come from. And if there's time, I may go through a case that I've done that begins to illustrate some of the economic changes that I'm talking about. So I think that one of the things I wanted to emphasize, which I have on this screen shot, if I can find it again, doesn't look like it's coming up.
All you need to do is wave your mouse toward the bottom of the frame where your video is, and it should pop up the menu to share screen.
Oh, it did, but the screen I was sharing seems to have disappeared.
Gotcha. There you go.
That's not so good.
That's just your email.
Yeah, I know. Let's see. Yeah.
You should be able to pick a program, or you can pick your entire screen and just pull it up. It's up to you.
Okay, I may just need to talk about it. It's not. I can't seem to retrieve it.
If you want, Bob, you can send it to me and I'll put it up.
Yeah, but I'm not finding the document where I have it. So.
Gotcha. No worries.
All right. So, what the point that I'm trying to make is that what's happening is that if we look at the share of IT spending that's going for traditional infrastructure versus cloud infrastructures, what we see is that the amount that's going for traditional infrastructure is now somewhere around 50%, and that it's likely to go down close to zero by around 2025. And there have already been announcements by a number of companies that they're shifting very dramatically over to using cloud services. Like Johnson & Johnson just announced a couple of weeks ago that they intend to have 85% of all of their apps running on cloud services by the end of 2018, and that each new dollar of spending that they intend to have by 2020 will not include any traditional infrastructure. So they're basically turning off their traditional infrastructure and going totally into an environment where they're based on cloud ecosystems. So what I've tried to do is look at what this means for the economy and what it means for jobs. So I think that basically this changes the way we use hardware and software, that in many cases like data centers, we're already seeing the use of controller and orchestration software that provides architectural controls so that infrastructure can be more flexible and scalable, and that we didn't see those things 10 or 20 years ago. And in an economic sense, one of the things that I'm trying to do is see if there's a parallel between this analysis of how we're moving to a more services-oriented economy and the kind of general purpose technologies that economists argued really were the basis for the rapid growth of GDP and productivity in the early part of the last century. And I'm trying to essentially argue that while a number of economists like Robert Gordon have said that by 2005, all of the innovations from the internet were over, that we've had a long period of innovation, some of which is marked by the continuing rise in patent filings, a lot of which are now focused more on the software side than on the hardware side. And so there's been a continuation of innovation, and that this innovation is in a number of ways associated with this changeover in the infrastructure that we're using. So I think what I'm trying to do is say that one could begin to make the argument that the parallel with the internal combustion engine is very likely cloud services or cloud-related ecosystems that are emerging, where we're seeing a lot of technology that's linked to those new infrastructures and new environments that are being created because of the shift over to cloud services and the Internet of Things. So one of the things that emerges very clearly from this changeover is a number of the rapid rise of fairly skilled jobs that are required for data analytics. So there's been a great deal of hiring of data analysts, data scientists, software programmers, etc. And some analysis of those jobs paints a demand for something like 200,000 more positions than will be able to be filled by 2020. And McKinsey, which did that analysis, also argues that as a result of focusing the way in which enterprises operate more on the analysis and use of information that they capture, we're going to need many more managers who have the skills to interpret what the data analysis shows and be able to tell other managers what they can do with it, or help, as I've seen in a number of cases, really shift the way the company operates into a new business model. So if one looks at Rolls-Royce, they don't just sell engines, they basically sell the time of using engines. So it's basically time on the wing. And their business model is now a service model where the latest step that they've taken is to offer zero defects or zero problems when a user of their engines uses it to take off, so that any plane that has a Rolls-Royce engine is almost guaranteed to not have any problems. I've seen the same model with the robot maker Fanuc, which is Japanese, which has gone to a model of zero defects also, so that when you use their robots like GM does on their assembly line, that their robots will not fail, that they've timed the robots so that they have a manageable maintenance period, but when the robots operate on the line will not stop because of a robot failure. So this is a very new business model, and it really means that what they're selling is not a robot, they're selling a service. And the service is built to essentially work with other people. I mean, at Boeing, they even have a name. The robots are called cobots because they take over certain functions that are difficult for humans to perform. And while I haven't seen the model change there, I almost expect that at some point, Boeing may become less of an aircraft seller than almost a services seller, and essentially take over airlines and run everything because they can already monitor and operate the 787s that they run through a mission control center. So I see a lot of the economy shifting over to how do we do data analytics, how do we use them to really improve business and business models, et cetera. So one of the things that I see is this initial demand for highly skilled people, but also for the managers who will explain the results of the data analytics they do. But then I've tried to put this into a value chain. And the way I've structured the value chain is to say that the skilled jobs also call forth the growth of jobs that are suppliers or supporters of their efforts, so that we could see for data analytics, you have the data centers that are used, the data center software, the analytics software that all come from other firms or are developed internally. So that's like a feeder in the value chain into the whole analytics process. I also see a growth of jobs at the other end after the analytics are done, when people take the data and do business intelligence and create software that captures the data that's been used for the analysis and then offers greater insight to it. So that also is a source of jobs. Then as the managerial jobs that I mentioned before, which I call interpreting jobs, are another part of the job growth. And then I think there are a couple of additional sources of job growth that might result from this whole changeover. One is jobs that improve how services are delivered, that help design more innovative ways to do this, that I've seen at Kroger and Walmart when they've developed this data analytics capability and really deployed cloud services and really built up teams to create apps to ride on this new infrastructure, that they can then change the way they interact with customers, the way they manage inventories, and the way they control costs, so that there's some real economic benefits to moving into this new infrastructure. And I think what we'll see is, as I'll mention later, a large change in the efficiency of running business, the costs of running business, and innovation in terms of the services that are offered. So I think there'll be ways to improve how these services are delivered, which I've seen in a number of firms, and then new ways to employ the analytic results, which I mentioned just before with Rolls-Royce and Fanuc. So I see those as all being sources of new jobs. I mean, I've done, in my first run through, looking at about 16 industries that are early adopters of cloud services in the Internet of Things. I've estimated that there would be about a little bit less than $1 trillion of new spending, which means that for US GDP, there'd probably be a $3 trillion increase. And I've put that in terms of a rough estimate of jobs, and I've estimated over 10 years that there probably would be conservatively about 8 million new jobs associated with these functions that I've talked about. Just to compare this to other estimates, the McKinsey estimate is that there'd be roughly 500,000 new jobs in data analysis and data scientists, and also that these managerial jobs that kind of cross the tech business environment, that there'd be a need for something like, I think, 1.5 million new jobs by 2020. So that would create a large number of jobs in addition to the ones that would come out of the data analytics, the software programmers, etc. And I think at the different ends of the value chain that I've talked about, that there's also a great deal of opportunity for job creation. I have not tried to estimate that, but based on the work that I'm doing, I'm trying to essentially go back and modify a forecast that's done by the Department of Labor that comes up with about a 10-year projection on where new jobs are likely to come from. One of the things that they don't do real well on is picking up things like the massive increase in the demand for jobs for data analysts. So I'm hoping what I can do is figure out in a number of industries where those data analysts, and to some extent where these new kind of analytic interpreter jobs would be, and readjust the forecast to see if I can then reforecast where job growth will occur and come up with kind of a different outcome or different forecast that could show that here's where jobs that are related to this transition over to a much more cloud services based infrastructure would come from. The other thing that I was planning to talk about today was what this means in terms of the economy. And the parallel that I'd like to draw is if you go back in economic history to the last century, when cars were first introduced and they cost about $1,000, sales were rather limited. As soon as Henry Ford got the price down to around $300, demand went through the roof. And so that shows that cars were a very elastic product when they were first introduced, that you got a much bigger response in demand to the change in price. And what I'm hypothesizing here is that if we get the same kind of shift over to cloud services, that it's possible that instead of looking for another hardware product that would be the internal combustion engine of the 21st century, that where we're going to find the parallel is with software, that the shift over to cloud services as a platform or as a base will basically engender lots of additional innovation. We already have things like the Internet of Things, we have Docker technology, we have other technologies to do business analytics that all ride on this platform or infrastructure. And I think that if you see something with that kind of a spin-off, it's not so different from thinking about, okay, I have an internal combustion engine, it lets me build cars, it lets me build trucks, it lets me build buses, it supports suburbanization, it supports the rise of shopping centers, so that there's really a diverse way in which this transformation of the economy could begin to affect productivity, economic growth, etc. And that's what I'm really hoping to look at a little bit more closely. So I think that if we get this changeover, that we're likely to have not only a beneficial economic impact, but there could be, as companies get rid of the spending they're doing on the infrastructure that they've always been using and kind of turn that off, that there might be a kind of accelerator effect that occurs once clouds get up to about 50 or 50% plus of total use for applications, etc. So I would expect that an industry like pharmaceuticals, if many of the companies do change over very rapidly to putting many of their apps in the cloud, because the need to really analyze data and do complex analysis of genome information as well as treatment information has become so key for competitiveness and survival, that we'll see almost like a follow-on effect to make the economic impact of this switchover even stronger than most people might expect. So I think that there might be a possibility here that that some of the economists who are looking for what's going to be the next new thing that really promotes economic growth, that they're looking for it in some kind of a tangible product or some kind of a manufacturing process. And I think it's right in front of our noses that we're seeing the rise of a different internet-based ecosystem that has become the new infrastructure for many businesses, and has been facilitated by the rise of mobile phones, mobile communications, much easier access, and while I've seen this in the industrial side, I think the other major driver for much of this will be all of the companies that provide cloud services. So the Amazons, the Googles, the Rackspaces, the Microsofts, the IBMs will also be spending considerable amounts of money to shift their operations to support this demand for cloud services, which has really come on the scene very rapidly and very dramatically. And I've kept that as what they're spending out of my analysis because I see it as a double counting. So I've tried to be fairly conservative about the impact on GDP and the impact on jobs. So in terms of the first part of this presentation, to kind of summarize, what I think could happen as we experience this transition over to a cloud services infrastructure is much greater innovation on the services side of industry and in services themselves, an increase in productivity, especially total factor productivity that's linked to innovation, and as a result of the much more widespread adoption of cloud services, an increase in growth and employment. And I think that a lot of this may not really kick into the economy until closer to 2020, because the need to continue to spend to keep traditional infrastructure lit up has acted as a real brake on progress. So it's almost like we've got these innovations, they're being adopted, but since companies are devoting so much of their spending to traditional infrastructure, they really haven't put the gas under really haven't created a fire under this transition. And I think that will begin to change pretty rapidly. So I would expect this might even start to show up in the statistics that we're seeing. A number of economists have argued recently that one of the reasons that productivity hasn't been affected that much by information and communications innovations is that they're mainly confined to the entertainment and information and communications industries, which only account for 10% of GDP. And what I've gone back and estimated, if you take the industries that I'm looking at, they account for slightly more than 40% of US GDP. So the other argument I'm making here is once we see an important minority and possibly a majority of spending of GDP associated with spending on cloud services, that will really change the way we're seeing technology innovation have an impact on the real economy. So that's kind of the main material I was hoping to cover. I think I went a little bit over, but I could do a short review of a case that I've done on an auto company to just concretize some of these improvements and then maybe take some questions.
Sure.
So,
concretize us.
Yeah. So one of the companies that I've looked at had a really complicated supply chain in the auto industry and was having problems dealing with that and using information about the supply chain to really change the design of the models that they were using. They couldn't really do things like evaluate if they changed certain materials in a new model truck, how much would that change fuel consumption? So one of the things they did was they went through this process of beginning to create an analytics capability, and they built up a staff of roughly a couple of hundred people up until a few years ago, which they've now made concrete within the organization. So they'll have roughly 400 to 500 people in the next year or two. And what they've been able to do is design a lot more sophisticated data analytics. I think they're buying some of this, but they're also designing a lot of it in-house. So what they've achieved with it is they introduced a new model truck, which they make roughly a 50% profit on, and its fuel efficiency was increased dramatically because a lot of steel that was used in the frame was switched over to aluminum. So they could calculate exactly how much that would improve the performance in terms of fuel efficiency. They also were able to go back and look at choke points in the supply chain that often slowed down their production line or created real issues. Like last year, one of the things they had to do was put various steel parts on flatbed trucks and ship them that way to their plants because shipping them by rail was too slow and really caused disruptions in production. Now they've been able to manage that much better. The other thing they've used it for initially is to figure out what kind of cars dealers really wanted and needed. And the issue they had there was that there's so many choices that a consumer had when coming in to ask for a new model, that there were quadrillions of possibilities that they could ask for. So they've used the system to essentially track and kind of prioritize what kind of models are put on dealer lots. And that saves them money because they save roughly $50 to $100 by reducing the inventory time that a dealer keeps the car. So from both of these things, I've estimated that they've been able to save roughly $500 million on the supply chain over about 4 to 5 years, which they have confirmed. And I've also estimated that they're saving north of $500 million by improving the time that inventory is kept on dealer lots. And they achieve this essentially by paying roughly $300 to $400 million. So the ROI on investing in these new infrastructure capabilities, including a lot with data and analytics and cloud services, is up around 400 or 500%. So, I mean, I see these huge returns. Some of them are due to cost savings, but I mean, in other companies like Boeing, what I've seen is not just the cost savings, but also the ability to go from kind of a product, a production line where things were almost done in a craft fashion, that a plane was put in a particular place, everything was brought to the plane, including all the electronics, everything happened in a single place. And then the plane, once it was done, would be taken out on a truck of some sort, and wheels would be put on, etc. But it was fully built up. Now what they've done is changed to a production line, and the production lines have become so efficient that they can now run almost 50% more production lines than they had before, and so their output of planes has gone up pretty dramatically, and the improvements in their sales that I've estimated, I mean, they have huge inventory backlogs that usually sit around for 5 or 6 years before they can be fulfilled. And I think what's going to happen is that they will fill those backlogs much faster. I'm not sure what this means in terms of competition. I think it will probably reduce the price of planes that they're selling and make it easier for other entrants to get into the to the airline business. I think it may also make it easier for them to kind of consolidate the industry, but I think that's a little bit further out. So that's kind of a quick summary of what I think is driving an interesting change, which will result in more jobs, greater productivity, and more economic growth. And I would see it contributing to a reemergence of economic growth towards the end of this decade. And I think that even though we have financial market signals, et cetera, that in terms of bond prices suggest that things will be pretty terrible in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that those things are being affected by other factors and really don't reflect what's happening in the real economy. So, okay, can I take some questions now?
You can. Thanks a lot, Bob. That's great. Okay. We have a raised hand from, I have David first and Steve.
Okay.
So if you could do a quick intro, David. I know most people know you, but for the millions of people watching, you could do a quick intro, and then same for you, Steve, with your question.
Right. Thanks, Ben. I'm David Nordfors. I'm the co-chair of I4J, Innovation for Jobs. I'm very happy. I'm very grateful to Ben and all the other people in I4J that makes it possible for me to be with you here today. So I'd like to ask Bob, something that strikes me is that we never ask, what can we do with this technology in the future? We kind of automatically think that, well, some inventor entrepreneur is going to find out a smart way, and we just trust that. But we don't think the same way about people. We say that we don't think, what can we do with people in the future, and some smart person is going to find out about that. We kind of just think that, well, now there's coming a robot and it's going to be able to drive a car, and then people will be able to do nothing. So it's kind of like we're more allowing, we're more optimistic regarding the future of what machines can do than the future of what people can do, which kind of seems a bit contradictory in a way, because, I mean, machines don't spend money, people spend money. which makes them the customers, right? So we should be more optimistic about satisfying the customer in the future, which means we find new things for them to do.
Right.
So do you have any example of these you brought up, like Walmart or Boeing or something, where they found a really smart new way of using the people they had that that hadn't existed before?
One example that's very interesting is what I've seen in the pharmaceutical industry, that instead of just developing drugs and doing all this sophisticated data analytics, I think what they're also starting to do is say we need to be more in touch with the people who we serve. And I think that's not just for clinical trials, but it's also for people who use their drugs, that I've seen efforts to kind of develop the capability of monitoring how people are using drugs. So there's a company named Serrano in Switzerland, which is the Swiss branch of German Merck, and they have a human growth hormone injector that has on it a sensor that sends back information that not only tells whether someone has used their growth hormone that day, but also gives information about how much of the dose did they get. And I think that this is kind of a very early stage for much more interaction between the consumer and people who are developing drugs. And I've also seen hospitals say that what they're going to do once they can analyze genomes as well as treatment patterns, that they will start to, instead of remaining a big hospital, they will set up branches that treat families that have similar genetic problems, whether it's a gene that's been deleted in a number of people in the family, or whether they have early cardiac death syndrome, which they could identify using gene analysis. But they would bring those people in and have a group within the healthcare center that would interact with them. So I think one of the things that this suggests is that there's going to be a need for much more hands-on in terms of serving people, that there may even be a very different economic model for many companies to work with. And so I think that also begins to shift how we use knowledge that people have in the consumer side, and that we begin to really cut down the barrier between companies and consumers, and also the kind of skills. Because I could easily see someone who is, say, part of a family that has a medical issue, that they could probably begin to learn almost as much as someone who's hired to work at a healthcare center. So if people have access to the kind of knowledge that they would need and really upskill themselves, I think what's helpful in what I've done is it begins to suggest what type of jobs might begin to emerge as a result of looking at this transition more closely. And I think it opens up the possibility of exploring, if we have this change, for instance, in the healthcare system, how do we get more people with those skills that can almost be like Johnny Appleseeds going around and helping people really understand their health issues much better, that perhaps we almost have like a outsourcing of a lot of the healthcare information, that you don't depend so much on your doctor anymore to just get information or just get it off the web.
So just to summarize then what I heard you saying, an example could be that a pharmaceutical company that now are much better at monitoring the people who take their medications could basically take somebody who is on the medication, who seems to have very much expert knowledge, and basically hire this person to communicate with others who are on the medication.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes done already. So,
okay, yeah.
So I don't think that's a big step to take. But,
yeah, but that would obviously be very enabled by cloud. Yes.
Right. Yeah, very much.
Yeah. Extremely good. Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
Very enlightening.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay,
I think we have. Thanks, Bob. David. I think we have Steve. You're up. If you could do just a quick intro, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, Steve Denning. I used to work in the World Bank for many decades. I'm now leading a learning consortium of firms that are sharing understanding of how these trends that Bob's talking about are actually working out in practice, what works, what doesn't work, and then sharing that with the world. And we'll be making a presentation on that at the Drucker Forum in November this year. And so 4 quick points. One is what we're seeing in the site visits of the Learning Consortium confirms everything that Bob was saying. And in fact, all companies are now software firms, even if they don't realize it. A hospital is a computer, a set of software, a car is a set of software, hotel is a set of software, everything is a set of software. And that is having dramatic reductions in costs, as Bob says, but also dramatic increases in value for customers. I mean, just take a dramatic example that's mentioned in the press. I mean, Spotify is beating Apple because it is listening to the music that customers love and then feeding that back to other customers so that they are able to recommend to customers music that they are going to love. And so that Spotify customers perceive more value than they otherwise would. The second thing is that we see in the site visits that to make this happen, you need radically different management. The hierarchical bureaucracy of the 20th century simply can't cope with this. You need agile management with self-organizing teams, rapid decision-making, working in short cycles, totally focused on delivering value for customer. It's a radical shift in management. And some companies, particularly the manufacturing companies, are just having real problems in getting into that rapid agile cycle. They're thinking in 1-year cycles, 5-year cycles, and
right.
these firms are thinking in 30 pages per day.
Right.
You're just in a radically different world. The third point is that the net benefit and in terms of jobs is far from clear. I mean, some of these big firms are making huge gains in terms of efficiency, but they're also looking at a lot of their existing processes, and the people who work in those processes, they are simply not needed anymore. So that the net is going to be negative, even though they're generating all of these jobs. They are not overall increasing jobs in that firm. Now, maybe they will go elsewhere and do something else, but it's not going to be a net growth, job growth. And fortunately, they're not really successful firms are not finding people to fill these slots by searching for the one person in the world who has the particular expertise, who gets it. They're rather having quick learning, so that everybody learns quickly, that everybody is able to master the technology. Yesterday's technology is going to be different from what's tomorrow. So trying to find exactly the right expert is a fool's errand. You have to have people who are able to learn rapidly on the flow. 4 quick points.
Okay.
Cool. Now I'll just do a quick little time check. We have 10 minutes left. So if we think about 5 minutes, any other questions from the group?
I'll try to respond quickly.
Yep. Sorry.
I totally agree with you. I mean, the thing that I've seen, I've looked at a number of companies to try to see if their work structure has changed. One of the things that's I saw this in Netflix because they went from a very siloed structure for software developers, quality assurance people, then deployment people and other staff who knew about networking. Now they've formed all of those individual jobs into teams at various levels within the company, and they can do things like modify an application sometimes in less than a half hour or 15 minutes. And if you look at the Red Hat survey of DevOps, you'll see that last year, well, I think it was this year, the top 50 companies are able to modify an app in 15 minutes or less. And there's some that do it in 5. So this whole idea of rapid learning has really become key. And I think that when we look at this new structure, that it's far more, that it really values the ability to collaborate, to understand, and to learn these new skills. So, I mean, one of the things that we're seeing is, like with Spotify, you can only get hired at Spotify if you know how to code. So there are some some basic skills, and I don't think we're really providing them. There's some companies that go around that, do training, etc., but you don't really have a recognition that we have new basic skills that go beyond the traditional math skills. So, and I think your thing about the net effect on jobs is still up in the air, but what I'm trying to do is estimate, is the magnitude of new spending large enough, and would it create enough jobs so that it would offset the loss of jobs that's occurring as we put these new systems in place? What my work suggests is that yes, we probably will, but I'm trying to take a closer look and see, what's the net effect if you really quantify this out, and what would be the skill switch over that is related to the kind of jobs we end up with.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Bob. I think, Philip, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you much. So, Bob, Philip Farah, I work for Gartner. I've spent my career at the intersection of innovation and strategy, both at Capital One and McKinsey & Company. My question is, assuming that the net effect is going to be negative in terms of job creation, and I tend to agree with Steve on that. And assuming that we are going to be in a situation where there is discussion of a minimum living wage, so that people can still survive in the absence of jobs instead of starting revolution. Any thoughts about using and leveraging this type of formula in a new economic construct where the type of jobs that people don't take today, let's say research and development, because the outcome is uncertain, and over the long run it works well, but if we had to pay people a minimum living wage, we could ask or pay it in return for something, instead of staying at home and playing video games and not starting revolutions. And it could be to do research. It could be to add a layer of human interaction, the same way you were describing it today in a variety of industry. It could be in arts or some other type of creativity. I was talking to folks leading humanitarian effort to try to deal with some of the largest humanitarian crises, and they would be really interested in having young people compensated as part of participating in such efforts. So did you think about kind of the economic construct that might go with the transition, at least, between the loss of job and the creation of new jobs?
I think that if we had a living wage available to people, particularly as they need to make a transition, that what comes out of what I've been working on is that there's going to be much more of a need to acquire new skills as people go through their careers. So that if we had a living wage and attached it to people doing new things or providing new services or learning new skills, that would be a real plus to the economy. I mean, the other thing that I think that I've seen happening is that we're seeing, because of conflicts, the destruction of a lot of infrastructure that people think really contributed to the growth and emergence of a lot of the Western nations, pure water, good sanitation, etc. Some of these things could be monitored much better using satellite technology linked to some of the analytic capabilities. So I think there are a lot of ways of supporting the resolution of some of these problems, and maybe even developing things that are needed for economic growth. I think the ability to access the internet in Africa is going to dramatically change the society over the next 10 or 20 years. But I mean, on your point about the living wage, that I think there ought to be more thought about how we use that to promote overall growth and to really have some impacts on productivity, on labor, wellness, and the chance that people have to acquire more skills as they go through their job careers.
Awesome. So I think that brings us close enough to the end. If we do another question, we're going to go over. Okay. So I want to say thank you to everybody. In particular, thank you to you, Bob. That was awesome. So thanks for everybody's participation, and stay tuned for the next live video Q&A session. The next one is Daniel Pianco, and he's co-founder of University Ventures, and he's talking about disrupting college. So how universities can survive the 21st century. And then we have Steve Denning, who has introduced himself in this forum, but then in many others. And Steve's talking about why U.S. entrepreneurship is dying. So I am really looking forward to both of those. And so it brings us to you, the general you. When are you presenting? So anybody can present in this forum as well as present again. So put your thinking caps on, share, ask questions, and you can reach me at ben@scaledriver.com. And that kind of brings us to our conclusion. So thanks, Bob. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you, I guess it's next week. July 19th is when Daniel is presenting, and then Steve is presenting August 3rd. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bob.
Okay. Bye.